Great, thank you very much, and thanks for the great introduction. Yeah, my name's Alex. I'm one of the co-founders of creativeai. We're a company based in Europe, actually all around, and we basically specialize in applying AI to creative industries, and we work a lot with the leading design agencies and studios around the world. So a lot of the visual designers and graphics artists that we work with, they wonder about the future, and they wonder if we're building this big red button that says automate creativity, and if someone's going to press on this button, and what's going to happen in the future if someone does that? Are we heading for some kind of cartoon moment where we hit the ceiling and then slide down the wall? Who knows? And I guess that's the question that everyone has, and that's why probably you're here today. But I'd like to flip this question around, and instead of asking what the impact of technology is on society in the future, instead I'd like to ask what society does to technology. What is the impact of our societal cultures and our values, and what has been the impact on technology? So I realize this is coming from the complete opposite perspective as everybody else is today, but I hope it stimulates some neurons, and I hope it gets you to think about the problem from a different perspective. So I did a quick survey on social media, and I found that 2 out of 3 people in the AI community, the IT and creative industries in general, on average, 2 out of 3 believe that machines will have superior abilities to humans in the future, both intellectually, creatively. That's 2 out of 3. Also, 67% is the number of Twitter bots that follow me, but I think that's just a coincidence. Whereas, as a company, creativeai, there are 70% of us in the team that think that humans always will have superior intellectual and creative abilities than machines, as a superset of these abilities. Some things machines may do better, but humans will always have the upper hand. So we're coming at the problem from a very different perspective, and so I hope that our story helps and is useful. We think of AI more, instead of this exponential curve of doom, we think of AI as a technology tree, very much like in a game of Civilization that you would play. And there are different branches that you can pick, and different options, and different types of techniques that you could use and mix and match. And some of the techniques in the past that we used may not have been funded well enough, or we didn't have the hardware, the necessary understanding as a society to pursue this research. But we have the choice to be able to go back in this technology tree and decide exactly what we want to achieve and what we want to accomplish and how we want society to turn out, and effectively jump back and make decisions according to what we would like to achieve. So 2 of the founding pillars of the inspiration of creativeai as a company are, first of all, the augmentation and interaction. And when you're working on creative things, that playfulness, that tactile feeling of interacting with something playfully is a very important part of it. And this all goes back to the work of Douglas Engelbart in the late 60s. And so we're big fans of his work and building on what he's done early on in the technology tree. But also the idea of generative patterns and patterns that create life and living systems and living organisms and rooms. And these are based on ideas from Christopher Alexander. And so these are 2 of our guiding lights and inspirations as a company. So we also believe very strongly that the team equals a product, or the organization equals a product. And that's called Conway's Law. And Conway's Law says that whatever your organizational patterns are, then those will be reflected directly in your product. So if you have any advantages or disadvantages or any politics, those will go directly into what you're building. And so at creativeai, we're firm believers in this, and we've also taken the opposite into account, which is the inverse Conway maneuver, which is to design the kind of product that you want to build, and then structure your organization accordingly such that the product then emerges out of your team organization. So we're very mindful about working on both of these and designing them accordingly and leveling them up side by side. Now, I'd like to take you through a very short history of creativeai. It's a very young company, but we've gone through lots of different mindsets that are reminiscent from the more like the industrial age mindsets, the information age mindsets, and what we think is a more like forward-looking, something that's coming, a more humanist approach, humanist mindset, which I will also get into. And for each of these mindsets, everything affects the whole company, the whole product, and there's AI everywhere here, but there's also how we think about things is intercorrelated. So I'm going to touch upon each of these. So when we started out as a startup, we didn't think like a big corporation. That's the advantage of a small company. But there were lots of external pressure and external expectations on us as a company. And so we fell into some of these traps, I would say, of this corporate mindset, which were not necessarily beneficial for us. So just looking from the legal perspective, this is also this idea of ownership is control, and as founders, we initially had most of the ownership, some for the team, and then the investors eventually all buy parts of the company as the company grows. But as shareholders, whether it's the founders or the investors, we basically are a small group of people that have control over the company. And we don't think that this structure, even if you have a board of directors, is very ethical. It's very few people that are in control of what the AI can do and what the impact is on society. And so we talked a lot about trying to address this, whether we have ethics committees or other solutions. But since this structure is not necessarily ethical in itself, we think it's a bit like putting lipstick onto a pig. So we've been trying to redesign this accordingly and think about it differently. But this, the ownership structure reflects inside the company itself. The company is a hierarchy, like a command and control structure, where the investors love to hear what your roles are. You're chief of science, chief of technology, chief of design. So we have these different labels that we gave ourselves. Even though we were a small company, these are what's expected from us. And in the future, maybe we'll have a chief AI officer with an army of machine learning engineers that report back to the chief AI officer. And this creates a lot of tensions, both within the hierarchy and within different branches of the hierarchy. People tend to be frustrated and dissatisfied by working in these kinds of environments because it is very much coming from a place of power and control, and it affects the people and their mindsets, and they spend a lot of time in internal company politics and not being able to affect other things outside of their hierarchy. So what does design do? Is it a separate branch from technology? So they just write documents and then throw them over the fence? This creates a lot of sadness as well. And looking at the statistics just from the US, the global US statistics, 18% of the people there are actively sabotaging their projects. Now, half of them are retired on the job. Are these the kind of people you want using the next generation of AI systems or building them? And these are consequences of the power structure and that goes on in these kinds of companies. So we wanted to change this, but still we inherited a lot of this sort of baggage from the outside, and people defined us as a team of engineers solving creativity. And it's very much a transhumanist message where we're coming in on a shining white horse trying to save humanity. We're going to solve creativity. But actually, there's nothing to be solved. Creativity is a process, and there's no solution to be found. And engineering is the least important part of it. So as a product, we also talked about generative pipelines, which resonated very well with some investors and with some big companies as well. And the idea of a generative pipeline is that you have an overall AI system that controls that end-to-end the generation of things. And then we put human-shaped holes inside this pipeline wherever there were big problems that we couldn't solve or that we needed more data. And this was a hybrid man-machine system, but it was not a humanist system. The humans were basically cogs in this generative pipeline that we were just using to gather data. So it's a form of centralization of power, but in this case, in the machine, and we use the words like cloud computing and platform, which is also, again, about centralization of power. So on the technology side, everyone talks about big data and deep learning, and for the same reasons, they're not necessarily the kinds of techniques we would like to pursue because every single individual's data is less important. You sacrifice every individual at the cost of the average. So if you're not average, then yes, you will get suboptimal performance, but nobody's average. In the creative space, everyone wants to be different, and so these techniques didn't work for us because they just had we have a lot of data, but we just don't think of it this way. We solve the problems using different techniques, and again, the server farm is a centralization of power, again, that's reminiscent of this industrial age mindset. So as a team, we started out firmly in sort of the internet age, thinking more like this. And so this affected how we approach things. But we were not really a cooperative. We didn't have equal ownership of the company, except right at the start when the company was founded. But after that, we sort of inherited a lot of existing legal structures, and we tried to give out as many options, employee shares as we can, and be as fair as possible, and write exit clauses that specify what happens to our technology should something happen to the company. But the thing that we benefited from the most was having a distributed team, and we're all around Europe, and we were able to hire a dream team of AI, front-end and back-end engineers, designers, systemic designers, visual designers, that fit with our company culture very quickly and very efficiently. And we found that consultants and contractors were the most keen to join forces with us and work with us. But we were very aware of this power tension between the company and the contractors, and we didn't want to turn into like some kind of gig economy or the Uber of AI. So we were very mindful about this, and this is why we slowly drifted out of this model, because this tension builds up in the network when you have this power relation between the company and its team members. The tension also builds up between the team members themselves, so there are conflicts between the design and the tech side of building the same AI process. And so we got around that by using popular self-management techniques and more transparency, which helps a lot. But these are kinds of reminiscent of, again, this industrial age mindset of trying to control everything by making sure everyone shares everything with each other. There's no trust there. So with people having more agency and being able to decide what they can work on, who they can work with, this being a big distributed network, it creates a certain confusion, uncertainty about what they should be working on. Should I work on this new feature of the AI product, or should I design this front end, or should I collaborate with this group? And so instead of being angry and sad, they're more like uncertain and afraid of making missteps. And this is because from school and from work, they've inherited this mindset of being in a hierarchy, and when that hierarchy is gone, many people just don't know what to do with the freedom. And this fear also translates into the way we communicated about things. We communicated our tool versus existing established tools, and our user base versus the future. Like, what happens if someone automates creativity? If you come and use our tool, then we'll use more augmentation-based approaches. And so we very much defined ourselves by this message that let's stick together and let's help each other and support each other. So the product in a very distributed model is also fragmented. You have lots of different tools on your phone for things like style transfer, things like photo manipulation, and passing data from these different applications together is a very difficult thing, and it's challenging and doesn't make for a very good experience. That experience is very broken and fragmented. So these are side effects of having large distributed companies that don't really work as one integrated whole. And on the technology side, we have this thing called the generative web, which we've been working on, that you can develop, run generative algorithms on the server to generate things for the designers, or on the mobiles, or on their desktop computers. Wherever the computation is most appropriate, it will happen there, and the data will get passed around accordingly. And this is one of the biggest benefits of the sort of information age mindset. But as a company, we found ourselves most recently moving into this more collective mindset, which is new for us, and I think it's relatively new in general. We've pulled together lots of different ideas from different places, but we're very curious to see where it's going. And this mindset starts with the people. We assume that every member on the team is a mature, rational adult that's responsible and that has a purpose, that knows why they're in the company and what they want to achieve in life. And that means that they have an internal locus of control. They feel like they have power over their environment and they have this agency. And this changes the company culture significantly. It makes for a culture that is based on trust, since you can trust each other to be mature, rational adults. You don't need this radical transparency to make sure nobody's making mistakes. And if someone does make a mistake, there's a culture of respect, or maybe even love, to make sure that that mistake gets fixed and addressed in an appropriate way. The company also works with its team in the same way, moving more into coaching, alignment, and lifelong relations between the company and its team members, as long as no foundational rules are broken. And so this is a good environment to build products in, innovative products, AI products, because it lets the team self-organize dynamically to solve difficult problems that would be very hard to solve with a very rigid structure. The problems we're solving, nobody solved before, and we need this kind of self-organization for people to come together and really complement each other's skills. It's like a band that effectively, as soon as there's a tune for a specific demo, a milestone, a client project, or some presentation that needs to be prepared, people with the necessary skills can just come together like a band, play for that particular performance, and then they can go back to regular jamming or practicing or join another project. And this makes things much faster to self-organize and very dynamic. And it's not a fixed network structure or a fixed hierarchy. It is more like a living organism that's pulsating and vibrating and that can quickly respond to changes. And we also think of the legal and the ownership side of the control of the company as this kind of performance, where you have different voices, in this case 4, or maybe it could be 5 different voices, the community, the team, the investors, the partner, each have their own message to bring that will help steer the company as a whole. And this makes it a much more ethical structure when there's not a single kind of voice that's dominating this whole board of directors, but instead it is the shared performance of a group of very diverse voices that come together to steer the company as a whole. and in this case, in favor of the common good. And so these are the kind of things that we're currently looking into with our partners and trying to set up fair shares for this. So as we move into this more humanist age, this also affects how the product works. The product is no longer a tool that we hit things with. It's an instrument that you play and that you interact with. And since it's an AI-powered instrument, that learns how you work and how you play with it, and you can adapt and vice versa. It becomes this feedback loop. So you work perfectly fine on your own as a creator, but the instrument also can do stuff on its own. But when you come together, the sum is bigger than the individual parts on their own. So this is very much the theme of augmentation, which also reflects in the message, the messaging that we can take instruments and put them into groups and then augment them and improve them and help them give them more agency and empower them and give them a stronger sense of mastery. And the technology is also equally fascinating, probably worth a whole new talk, but it's more about the interaction design. How do creators interact together? How do we build our systems into instruments that creators will interact with and that can plug together modularly and come together in this kind of jamming session or creative environments where people brainstorm, each with their own unique focus and their own unique advantages. So to conclude, we think there's a direct relationship between how you structure your organization, how you think about it, and the product. And if you want to have a positive impact on society, then you should start right at home with your organization itself and rethinking everything from the ground up. And we've done so very mindfully by taking the organization's principles, and sometimes they were ahead of the product, and then leveling up the product, and sometimes the opposite. Sometimes the product was ahead of where we were as an organization, and we had to level up the team as well. And by doing so, we've maybe gone slightly out of the comfort zone of most people here. But yeah, we think it's a very promising way forward. And just looking at how the team has responded to this and how our potential future hires, how they resonate with our culture, we think in the future, the best performers and the best teams will be the ones that really engage and resonate with the jobs that they're working on, the projects that they're developing. And yeah, if you're looking to work with us in any way, just as a company, not necessarily on creative things, but especially on creative stuff, then we'd love to talk to you and hear if this message resonates with you. There's certainly a very promising future for it. So thank you very much for your time.
Hi.